So what did you love about high jump or track and field?
Honestly, it was just the fact that it was something that I was finally good at. I think that the reward system is what made me love it.
What about the way you set up CRM systems and the fact that you've been behind the curtain at a lot of businesses makes you different than everybody else?
The biggest thing is going to be the variety of niches that we work with. Most people that are in our industry or do what we do,
Niche down.
they niche down. Everybody tells me niche down, charge more. And in my mind, there's something that tells me I'm going to figure out a way to make it work and I'm going to make it profitable.
Ashton Wilson is a former Division I athlete turned marketing strategist. He is the go-to guy for entrepreneurs who want to scale.
He's a founder of Active Solutions AI and builds AI-powered CRM systems that helps business owners step up their game with tech and tough love.
Conversational AI was kind of the main point of everything that we did, and it evolved into us doing CRM builds as well.
Break down, like, what is conversational AI?
Conversational AI, a perfect example of it would be,
In this episode, you're going to hear from a good friend of mine, Ashton Wilson, who's been on the forefront of the AI space, building out the conversational AI for Go High Level, and us talking about not just automations in their business, but his journey through life, through sports, and how that's helped him become the entrepreneur and business owner that he is. If you've ever been interested in seeing kind of where your world of sports could cross over into your passion in business, this is the episode for you. Hey, welcome to the pod.
what's going on? Thank you for having me.
Ashy.
Don't.
Oh, no, I figured that's how we started off, right?
I don't
know. We don't want to start it off like that.
That's Angela's fault, by the way.
She slipped.
She did. She did.
Oh, it was cute though.
Could have been worse.
Probably.
Yeah, you should see the other things she calls me.
Oh, hey, babe. So who is Ashton? That's the real question.
Who is Ashton? That's a great question. There's a lot of ways I can answer that. The most simple way that I will answer it, though, is Ashton is the founder of Active Solutions AI, where we build artificial intelligence and CRM systems that double your booking rates.
Yeah, which you've done for us, and it's been fun to see your journey, not just where you are today, but like how you got here.
Mhm.
You actually accelerated your growth, which has been amazing. I think what's really cool is you have this like figure it out gene. That's something that is a part of who you are. You're very persistent. You're very disciplined in that regard, but you like learned to figure it out. Where did that come from?
That's a really good question. And I know the exact answer to that question, actually.
Well, by the way, I'm going to really mess you up this one. We're going to actually count how many times you say actually, and that's a really good question.
Okay. Cool. Awesome.
Right.
So when I actually had a really weird upbringing, I would say. I was living with my mom, single mom, raising me and my brother, and then my sister was living with my dad. But during that time period, my brother was going through a tough time, which put me in a weird environment where I was exposed to drugs at a very young age and stuff like that. So there was a time probably between the ages of 14 and 16 where I was very lost. And then I discovered something that I was very good at naturally, which was high jumping in high school.
Yeah.
And I realized that I kind of put the pieces together in my head. I was like, wow, I really like this. Why do I like it? I like it because I'm good at it. And I was able to jump. So I was naturally better at it than the average person. And I kind of put the pieces together. And that whole summer, I ran like 5 miles every day as like a 16-year-old and worked really hard to kind of excel as an athlete. So that specifically is kind of what trained my mind to believe that if you can find your inherent skills that you have that are better than the average person, and you leverage work ethic to kind of enhance those, it will take you where you want to go, or you'll see the results that you want to see. So that's work ethic came from when I was 16 and I dunked the basketball and PE class, and the track coach came up to me and asked me if I wanted to.
You do not see a lot of white people do that.
Yeah.
That was impressive.
Yeah.
You need to jump over a bar.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what happened.
That's cool. What happens when you realize, like, if you work at something, you get better at it? Like, what's that feeling for you when you're young, lost, trying to figure out who you are? It's never easy. I think everybody has a childhood that is tough in a lot of ways because they really don't know who they are yet. And in that kind of stage of like learning who they are and adapting to their environments, they handle certain situations differently and sometimes harder than others. But there's this kind of clicking moment where it's just like, man, it just gets over that hill and then it's a lot of momentum going downhill in a positive way. What happened for you when the things started to click and you realize like, if I put more work into this, this was an outcome that I enjoyed?
Yeah. So I almost said that's a good question.
Yeah. Coaching as we're doing this.
There's a couple of different ways to answer that question specifically. I don't think anybody really knows who they are at 16 years old or at that age. There's also a lot that goes into, even if you work very hard at something, sometimes you get very disappointed. And I think going through the process of exercising a certain skill set, you learn a lot about yourself throughout that period. So for example, a perfect example is I worked really hard throughout the whole year. At the beginning of the season, I fractured my ankle. All of that hard work in my mind down the drain. How do you get over that? Like it really kills you. And this is just an example, but that can happen in any scenario in life. It can happen when you're trying to work on a career or work on a sport or whatever it is that you're trying to get better at. You learn things about yourself when you have to experience the lowest of lows and the highest of highs. You kind of learn more going through that curve. So I think you have to experience the downfall of disappointment, or of maybe hitting rock bottom because you don't have something to work for, and that's kind of how you figure it out, or experiencing and understanding yourself and how you behave whenever you do have like a super high and you have like a really good month, or everything that you ever wanted to happen happens. How do you deal with that?
So what did you love about high jump or track and field?
Honestly, it was just the fact that it was something that I was finally good at. That's it. I think that the reward system is what made me love it.
And did you find in the past, whether it be school or whether it be other parts of your family dynamic, that you weren't good at it and that like affected you in any other way? Or like what made it where like this was the thing that I was good at and I can actually see a difference because I'm constantly getting my butt kicked in another environment?
I think it was just an easy niche to focus on in that young of an age. I don't have other things. I'm not going for a career yet. I'm not looking at the colleges. I'm kind of too young for all of that. One thing that I did know is that my older brother is always better at sports. He had scholarships to go play football, baseball, basketball. And I was always kind of like the middle of the pack. Like, I'd get some playing time, but I was never, I'd never stand out. Nobody really wanted to come like see my games and watch me play besides my mom. And high jump was
the most important fan of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. She never missed a game, actually. She would drive hours to come watch even games that were too far away. But high jump specifically was one of those things where the first time I ever tried it, I won. And I was like, I got to experience winning. And I'm like, I think if I actually worked on this, and then I continued to win, and then I kept getting the reward system of what hard work does when you get a head start at something.
If you are an online trainer or coach looking to scale your business online and provide nutrition lessons, coaching, or training to clients, the #1 software for personal trainers, Coach Catalyst.
Yeah, there's this concept that people need to learn how to win.
Mm-hmm.
And that feeling of winning builds almost, it's like it's a new feeling that you don't know you have until you go through it.
Yeah.
Like people are like, oh, you'll learn from failing or you'll learn from this. Like, no, you actually learn a lot from winning.
Yeah.
And that feeling of like, I did it. I put my best out there and I did it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you don't have that same feeling if you win, but you don't put your best because you realize like, I didn't give it my all. There were some areas where I cut the corners a little bit.
Yeah.
But there's something to be said about a individual sport in winning because nobody else helped you jump over that bar.
Yeah.
So there's the work that you put in was directly correlated to the outcome that you were responsible for. And that if you put in better work and you had a good process, the output was significantly better.
Yeah.
Fast forward to today in your business, do you see the relationship of sport correlate to how you operate as an owner, how you operate as a partner for a lot of these companies that you support?
Absolutely. 100%. And in the fashion that it's another thing that I have an obsession with, that when I started it, which is actually really weird. I think the experience with athletics gave me the feedback loop to understand if you work hard at something, like it'll, and the results will come. But business never starts as, you're better than the average person at it. When I started a business, I sucked. And you probably know what that's like too. You get into the game, things don't work. You don't really it seems like it's going to be easier than it actually is. And then you get a year into it and you're like, this sucks. There's a lot that you have to learn, but I think you need some type of persistence or feedback loop or history of experiencing, I worked hard at this and finally got the result, to be able to stick with something that far. And I think that's why top level athletes are great entrepreneurs most of the time.
Yeah, it's their commitment to excellence, number one. I use the high jump analogy is, you have a couple choices, right? You jump over a bar and then there's a new level. So there's this all idea of, like, in sports, we're always moving the goalpost.
Yeah.
But in high jump, once you clear that bar, it's like, let's put it up. And then if you miss and you knock the bar over, you don't drop the bar down. You just get better and you get stronger and you get, the ability to tap into something to be able to have a better skill to jump over the bar. And in business, it's the exact same thing, where it's like, as a leader, your job is to set the bar at a certain level, and you have now set the standard. You jump over that. If somebody on your team doesn't clear that bar, you don't lower the bar for them, because that then lowers the standard of your company. You basically say, hey, no, there's a process that we have in place that if you put the inputs in, you'll be able to reach the outputs that our expectations are above this bar.
Yep.
And it's the same concept, just from an analogy standpoint, is people in sports have persistence. And in a lot of other environments, without that level of, like, knowing that it's going to get hard, they quit too early. Most people are going to quit in general. The issue is just quit tomorrow, not today. Because if you quit today, then you haven't reached your potential. And everybody wants to kind of tap into, I think, their human potential. They want to know where their limit is. And, you went on from high school and you went on to college, and then you jumped in college. What was that like? Were there lessons in high school that you learned that were very different lessons in college that you picked up because you were already at a certain skill and you had to work through it? And then you tapped into actually becoming a decathlete, and then you had to learn a lot of different skills.
Yeah.
What happened there? What was that process like?
That's a great question. One thing I realized was that there's always a bigger room to walk into. So, for example, when I was in high school, by the time I got to the end where it was like senior year state, I was kind of the best, right? I jumped 6 feet 7 inches.
Shit.
That would be.
I gotta give you a little props. I get a little bit. That's impressive.
Thank you. Senior year of high school, only 2 years of experience, because I didn't start jumping until the end of my sophomore year. But I worked really hard to get to that point, and then I got a Division I scholarship. And I really manifested the school that I went to, which is awesome how those pieces came together. Whenever I got to college, I realized that you walk in a room, you never get to the biggest room. Like, you get to college and now you're at a level where 6'7" is now the standard. And maybe even a little below average, depending on, like, who you're jumping against. So there's always more work to be done. No matter how good you are in a small room, like, it does not matter. There's always a next level you have to get to. And sometimes you have to be exposed to that to realize how much harder it's going to be to get to where you actually want to be.
Yeah, you could be a small fish, in a big lake, or you could be a big fish in a small pond. And once you move from one to another, it changes your environment really quickly. And I'd say in sports and life and anything, is environment always wins.
Yep.
But you have to decide where you are. Like, does the environment suit your goals? So sometimes being a big fish in a small pond, that environment doesn't suit your goals because you want more. So you kind of want to get out of your small town exposure and you want to get into a bigger and better environment. And I think that that's true once we start to see our experiences, not just athletics, but our experiences as an entrepreneur and our experiences in business, is that, yes, we want more, but more is not always better. Sometimes a better environment is better than having more of the same. So you have to decide, like, what room you want to be in, and then set your table for that too.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about how you manifested this idea of the school you wanted to go to, and then you end up with those logos and those colors on, because oftentimes most people don't get that opportunity, but they also think that they have their dream school, and they think that if they don't get to the dream school, that's a failure. But they also don't know how to actually visualize their dream school. I mean, in the recruiting game, I would tell people like fall in love with the school that falls in love with you, because they're going to lie to you throughout the entire recruiting process. And then once you get there, it's a different reality check. Like you said, you walk into a different room, and in that room, you're dealing with the best people.
Yeah.
So manifesting the school that you went to, how did you do that at such a young age? And what was the mechanics that you went through to make that happen?
So I didn't even really realize that I was doing it. It wasn't until later on that I looked back and realized how much I actually was manifesting the entire time. But I used to go to bed, and that was all I would think about is high jumping at that college. I used to, before I go to bed, all I would do is watch YouTube videos. And I think it's when you think about something nonstop and you create this vision in your head of like, I really want to do this. This is, you start to create an obsession around that. And you start creating action plans in your own mind. I think that's what manifestation is I really want this thing. It's all I think about. Your brain will subconsciously start to plant seeds of these are the actions I need to take to actually make it happen. So the work that kind of followed me thinking about it nonstop, I really was obsessed with it, was I would watch YouTube video tutorials on like how should my approach in the high jump be to hit the perfect angle of takeoff to get a rotation over the bar, stuff like that. If I had a bad meet, it would just burn in my brain. It would all I would think about. I would go 11 p.m. I would drive up to the track, and I would they wouldn't have the mats out, but I would still run my approach. I would run it like 100 times, like 11 p.m. at night. So things like that. It's like you create the idea of what you want in your mind, and then you just start. The work becomes no longer a choice. It's you want it so bad that it's like you almost have to. It's like an itch.
Yeah, it's you get to do this.
Yeah.
And it's like a luxury. I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
When you talk about like creating this action plan, we used to do these for athletes where we have these maps, massive action plans.
Yeah.
And it's like, give me a massive goal that you want to achieve. Here's your action plan that needs to take place in order to kind of achieve what you want. And then we'd break them down for our student athletes. We'd break it down. We would have a map for a massive academic plan, a massive athletic plan, and a massive action plan, which would be overall this kind of orchestrating where they want to go. And then how do we actually take plans and put them in place so that aligns with where their ambitions are? Because I think oftentimes athletes' actions are not aligned with their ambitions. And that's a problem. It seems that you are very much in alignment with all of the work that you did. So you had this plan in place, you weren't distracted, but you were focused. How much of that focus during that time was because you've seen what it's like to actually not be in a positive environment, whether it be associated with being around drugs, being in a single, parent household? What about that made you actually realize like focus was probably the biggest key to your success?
I actually, funny enough, I think I was chasing the goal more than I was like running away from the pain. I don't think I had a too big of an impact for me. The only thing it did was the realization of like the separation between the two. Like, this is what I'm chasing now as opposed to where I was before. But it wasn't a huge, I mean, if anything, it was just a maturity thing. Like, I got to experience a lot at a young age. And then once I got to experience good things, I had a bigger spectrum of my mind, right? If you grow up in an environment where everything's just always like, maybe you're always around drugs and you never have the opportunity to leave, or you're in a low household income and that's all your community is. It's like the only spectrum you have in your mind is like, to some people might be terrible, but for you, it's like, your highs are somebody else's lowest of lows. So when I started to experience better after that, I think the spectrum in my mind just got larger of like what's bad and what's good. And then I knew what to stay away from more.
And I think that you said it right. It's the maturity, because maturity is also perspective of those same situations. You see it differently because you are more mature, and that's a perspective thing. The two things that I take away from that, what I'm hearing, is this idea of you're not chasing something. You're running away from something, that you're chasing towards something, but it's the idea of replacement. It's like, I've taken something that's in a situation that I don't want to be in, but it's like, I know there's a situation that I would rather be in, and I'm going to go after that. And I think that's really, really important. So that's a big deal. And then the second one is just, I think, a concept around like accountability and ownership. It's like, I'm going to do it. No one else is going to do it for me. You were not a victim. And this idea of like, yeah, you didn't have maybe the best of luxuries growing up, but you're here now, you look the part, you're doing great. You're able to, provide for yourself and your family. Looking back, you got to be proud of what you've done, because if you made some real critical changes that I think other people would view you as probably not capable of doing. Were there any moments in your world where people said, that's probably not who Ashton is? He wasn't going to make it. They don't view you the same way? Because you've given your age just by the fact that you're able to do film study on YouTube, which I wasn't able to do. So the fact is that we do know, like, the eye in the sky doesn't lie. However, the fact that you're actually looking at things and trying to make things better, that's this level of like visualization's a big deal. You're seeing it both from a manifestation for like your overall goals, but also from a practicality standpoint. In order for me to do reps, I got to watch somebody that's significantly better at this thing than I am. And I want to pick up a tool that I could use and put in my arsenal so I could get better at it. So this like constant like practice, this individual nature of like accountability, it's basically you saying, I'm not a victim. A lot of times people can say, hey, you should be here. I don't believe that for anything. You don't believe that. In your entrepreneur journey, you've not necessarily started and stopped a bunch of different things, but you've gone through a path that where you are today, it opens you up to so many different businesses because you support so many different businesses, but you didn't start there. You started in an area that you were probably more familiar with. Yeah. Right. Fitness, gym space, because you're a bit of a gym rat. And then you started helping gyms out. What were you doing for them, and how has that changed now? Because you do a lot of, you work with a lot of different businesses today.
Yeah. When I started my first business, which was my first real business, I should say, was Gym Closers. But before that, I actually tried a bunch of different things: affiliate marketing, automated book publishing. Like I tried to start all of these different things.
Did you sell acai berry on like wine bottles too, or no?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, at some point in time. That's kind of where I started. And then I landed on a marketing agency. And at first I actually started, it was a marketing agency for chiropractors. And then, but I couldn't get any clients. Then it was a marketing agency for dentists. Couldn't get any clients. And I was like, what if I just stick with what's familiar? So I went with a marketing agency for gyms. And at first it was called Innovative Era, which eventually became Gym Closers. Gyms was the easiest for me to get my first couple of clients because I knew gyms. I knew friends that had gyms. I'd just hit them up and I'd say, hey, like I can get you leads. Let me do it for free for the first month or whatever. That's where the journey started. And that led to us working with over 120 brick and mortar locations, which is a really solid first year of business that led to the rest of, the entrepreneur journey. But I did start somewhere familiar. It felt like a safer space. And I think it gave me a little bit more confidence because I knew what to talk about. I knew what their struggles were because I ran a gym myself. So it was a lot easier to kind of get the ball rolling.
Yeah, you speak their language. I mean, there's, in business, when you deal with different industries, there's a niche down language. And the minute you talk about industry specific context and you understand it, they immediately go like, oh, you get me. You get me. And being someone who's in the gym doesn't look like you do lift at all, but that's actually not. Yeah. You just finish your little high rocks, little CrossFit body, whatever you guys do.
Yeah, I throw some weights around. The high rocks was fun though. We should do one together.
So no chance, not happening.
Why not?
It's not happening.
All right.
I have no desire to do that.
That's unfortunate.
I'll
get you to do one.
Cool.
Get you to do one.
Yeah, you got to do 5-minute rounds with me then. However long your high rocks is, then you have to come in the gym and do my thing.
Okay. Deal.
Deal?
Deal.
All right. You heard it here, so.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. No tapping or no quitting then.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
I got to use pink weights though if I do your little challenge.
Okay.
I got to use.
Okay. It's going to be the same weight, but it's just.
It will.
They'll just do
if that's going to happen. That's a problem.
Just different color.
All right. Neon blue for me.
Yeah.
Take it.
Okay.
If you are a small business that believes that you are better than your competition, but you are not recognized for how good you are, and you want to build your brand and drive attention, need a brand new website or want just general help on marketing? Sites at Scale.
So you move from the gym side and you move into this kind of AI space. AI is taking over the world. Like if you haven't figured it out by now, it is going to consume an entrepreneur's mind, either because you're behind it, or because it's actually accelerating your business, or it's taking business from you. You're now in a position today where you could take 8, 10 people's jobs and consolidate them and reduce errors. What does Active Solutions do today that, in your mind, AI is the kind of, it's just on the forefront of? Like, where do you think it's going, and what do you do now for businesses?
Yeah. So when we first started Active Solutions, it was actually by accident. We created a conversational AI bot. We were one of the first to do it, and it was a direct link to ChatGPT 3 when it first came out. And it was meant to be for gym owners only. So we started running ads for that, and it was conversational AI for gym owners. They don't like to call their leads. I don't know if you knew that. They have a lot of,
Shocker.
yeah. So we built the bot because we were trying to set ourselves apart, and then just make it easier for gym owners, give ourselves a sexier offer. And when we launched the ads, we were getting like $2 leads. And when we're calling these leads, they're like, "Hey, I'm not a gym owner. I'm actually a chiropractor, but this is really cool. Like, I feel like this could work for my business." And that was for multiple different industries: dentists, online businesses, small business lenders. And we eventually got more clientele that weren't gym owners than that were, and we had to rebrand. So we became Active Solutions.
Got it.
Then that kind of spiraled where conversational AI was kind of the main point of everything that we did. And it evolved into us doing CRM builds as well, and then automating onboarding processes. When people are using ClickUp or Asana, or Monday, we're taking information from their CRM and automating even more actions so that it moves things automatically to the back end, makes it easier for their project management or their fulfillment team, etc. So now we focus mainly on CRM and project management automation, but conversational AI is kind of a cherry on top to what we do.
Break down, like, what is conversational AI?
Conversational AI, a perfect example of it would be if you're running ads, you're generating leads consistently.
When you say ads, do you mean like Meta? Where are you?
Anywhere. So you're running ads.
What are our options?
Meta, TikTok, LinkedIn, and Google.
Okay.
Those are probably the 4 main ones. My favorite is Meta. I would, for most businesses, Meta is what's going to work, unless you're something where Google would work for emergency services or something that often gets searched in a local area.
Okay.
So plumbers.
Intent-based.
Exactly. But if you're generating leads in any way, shape, or form, and these are warm leads, we don't necessarily work too much with cold outbound or anything like that. But you have people submitting forms on websites. You have people submitting forms on Facebook, on TikTok, wherever you're running ads. When that lead comes in, what's most important is, first is speed to lead. So reaching out to that person and trying to prompt a reply. So you ask a friendly question that's very easy to answer. You don't want to make the person think too much. You want to make it very easy for them to respond. And then the AI is actually what's developed the talking track. So we prompt it to have a background, a history, to know about your business. We even give it like where it went to college so it can refer to past experiences in conversation if it needs to. Then we ask it a series of qualifying questions, it will ask the prospect a series of qualifying questions. Once it's qualified and it reaches a certain stage, it will get the person to book an appointment, and then we leverage that to increase booking rates.
Awesome. And then so now you take that, you build it out. Well, you either have your CRM side of things, you have your project management side of things. I like to put things on like a podium. So like first, second, third. So for everybody that doesn't know, ClickUp would be your gold medal, and then the other ones would be somewhere else in the medal races. So let's just start with that.
I disagree, but yeah,
that's okay. You can disagree all you want. Yeah. That's just reality. Okay. Yeah. There's only one person that wins. So I'm gonna go with ClickUp.
I don't know. I think Asana is number one.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so. I think that there is, everybody could use ClickUp. So you could have it in a household, but a $2 to $3 million company that's trying to scale to 10 to 100 million can't use Asana, but they can use ClickUp.
Okay.
And I think that's the gap. The gap is, how are you actually managing the back-end automations, and how are you managing the rest of the actual information? Can you create a your own brain inside of those other platforms, that it could pull from all of those and then silo informations inside of the other parts of those folders or platforms, and then link it all back to a single customer, and then leverage all that data without having to go outside of that platform. And that's where ClickUp has the massive advantage. Everybody's trying to catch up. But the biggest thing is not having to use external tools to be able to gather information and context in the situation, which ClickUp Brain has the ability to do that. It's the ability to actually take that card and get context when you ask that question. So instead of just using generic ChatGPT on an AI platform for a project management platform, ClickUp Brain has the ability to take it in context of the question you're asking based upon where you're asking the information. So it's basically its own multiple different chatbots, AI systems inside of its own project management platform that you don't have to build.
Yeah.
So that being the fact that it's native is really so powerful. And then if you could reference it, just like you could reference at chatbot, at custom chatbot, when you're doing a prompt, you're doing that inside of your own project management platform, and it has all of the data.
Yeah.
So the fact that you don't have to build anything and it's all internal is where it has the massive advantage, because it's used to working with $100 million, $1 billion companies. So when that scales down, it allows you to actually have the ability to scale up.
So a question for you is, would you say that even for a small business that's starting out, let's say you have a business that's doing $20,000 a month, something like that, would you recommend that they start with ClickUp to save them the hardship of having to switch from one platform to another?
Yeah. So like the pain of switching is one of the most difficult things in business. And this is for any software company. So like the pain to change is so hard for most business owners to kind of deal with, because it's opportunity cost. It's like, if I'm going to do this and then I have to leave it, I have to go to another thing. All of a sudden it's like, I have to count and factor in the learning curve. I have to factor in, the speed of operations. I have to factor in, my team being frustrated and a cultural shift. Personal to a handful of things, using Zapier and Trello is your best bet. The minute you graduate from that, I'm bumping right to ClickUp. And the reason for that is platforms may be pretty, but it's the same thing with information that is telling everybody that ego, I'm so smart. That's a lot of really good information, but it's not useful.
Yeah.
So like the conversation around value is as simple as, is something useful to you? Because you and I may get a piece of information about something, and to me, that may be, $100 value. And that means that the usefulness of that information is giving me a value equal to $100. But that same information, because you may be better at business or you may be in a different situation, that same piece of information is no longer $100, it's $10,000. And it's the position that you're in your business makes that piece of information more valuable, because the usefulness of it changes the actual value you get.
Very true.
And when you start getting information, you want to make sure that the information is useful. And then based upon that usefulness dictates the value that it is to you. So when you're collecting all of this stuff in multiple different project management platforms, what happens is the content is not useful. Whereas in, call it a Trello board, but let's just call it a Kanban board, because the idea is that it's just simple. You're going to move things from left to right, to do, doing, done. The way I would manage a personal Kanban board is on deck, to do, doing, third party, and then done. Because in my world, I have things that I just want to have in this backlog. And then I want to have things that are I'm doing, or that are to do, like priority list. Because if you have tons of priorities, you have no priorities.
Yep.
Right. And then I was like, here's basically my to-do list is my priority list. And then that is like what I'm going to work on next. And then I pull that in and I'm doing the work. And while I'm doing the work, it's in that kind of stage, and then it's done. But with me personally, I may have to ship something and somebody else may be grabbing that and taking it to go ship. I may have to get a copy edited, so it's now with a third party, and then it's going to come back to me. I may have to get shirts printed or something, and it's with the third party vendor. And then it may move from third party back to doing again, because I may have more work to do. And then I might skip level and then it's done. So that is the most simplified productivity board. And I learned all of my personal productivity from two people. One, Tanya, right? Because I learned how to pack when we went on our first vacation. And the second person is Ari Meisel, who is known to be the most productive person in the world. I don't know how you get that title, but the fact that he coaches Tony Robbins and coaches, Dan Sullivan and coaches people that are the best in the world at what they do, and has been the person behind the automations of their lives, right? And the ability to kind of optimize those things. That is what makes somebody very productive, is he's seen things from so many different perspectives. So for me, it's the simplification. So once you kind of move from a combine board, that then you could like plug in one like Zapier and you could do anything with Zapier or Make. But once you kind of graduate from that, I want to be able to make sure that the information I'm putting in my platform is useful. So as you start looking at tech platforms, every card that you have and or note on that card needs to be useful. And as you deal with different team members in your company, your overview level is going to be different. So for me as a CEO of a 100+ person company, my overview is it's like in the sky, but I want to be able to get in the weeds to find out what actually happened in a certain use case. And you can't go from, the airplane view or the Blimp view to on-field that quickly in certain platforms. But the power of ClickUp is the fact that I could actually go from the Goodyear Blimp over the stadium, and I could scan to the video guy that is videotaping the game, to the coaches in the coaches box, to the coach on the sideline that has a different perspective, to the player that is front and center, got to put his hands on the player, understand that, hey, they're coming in zone blocking, this guy's down blocking, I got to, scrape that and hit that hole, because that is what the individual's doing. But they have a lot of blind spots when they're in the trenches. And it's our job as leadership and executives to pull back and be able to see things at this, kind of coach's view box, right? Standpoint. And I think that's what allows you to do that fast, going from basically the coach's box to the ground floor as quick as possible is really, really important.
I think you might have sold me on ClickUp.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Careful.
Did I pay you to say that?
No, but I will say Chris is the man.
Yeah.
And when you start to get into environments that are AI powered, but fundamental principles, like first principles still apply, that's when it's really impressive. So, because ClickUp Brain is incredible. However, the way it's set up matters more than anything, because it's how things are organized. And if you have that, now all of a sudden you could have your staff that's managing your ad platforms, and your staff that's managing your automations, and your staff that's managing high level, that's in there working on a card, and your sales staff that's looking at a pipeline, that's just going there asking a question to say, hey, I need all this data. Give me a recap of the last 3 weeks with Active Solutions as a customer, or Dr. Ken Connecton's Chiropractic Center, or Parker Chiropractic Center. Give me a recap of the last 3 months of what have we done for them, because I have a quarterly review with this client. And a PO, a product owner in our business, could give hey, give me a monthly recap, because they're doing a monthly call with that client. And they can say, what are the biggest takeaways? What do we need to work on? What are the things that we have to watch out for? And you could type that in, and all of a sudden it spits it out if the information's in there. So in our role, in the world of sales, we used to have this saying when I built sales teams. And we would have this saying that if it wasn't in the system, it didn't happen. So if it wasn't in Salesforce, it didn't exist. So don't come to me telling me that I followed up with all my leads. Don't come to me telling me that you did all these things. I don't really care. If it wasn't in the system, it didn't exist. So in our business today, as it's getting significantly bigger, we're, our motto is simple. It's, if it's not in ClickUp, it didn't happen. Now, because if I were to go and use that data now, it's useful to me because I want to extract it. If I was going into another platform and I didn't build external AI on top of it, which you can, but if I didn't do that, then that information is just egocentric. It's just a expert guru online telling you how much they know.
Mhm.
And they're just saying how smart they are. Here's all of this information. It's basically a word salad. And you hear this all the time, but it's not useful. So the direct correlation to useful information is what's valuable. And platforms on the business side need to be valuable. So a good example, we don't have our sales team in ClickUp. We have our sales team in High Level because they need to live where the work is being done.
Mhm.
And the work is being done in ClickUp. They need to live. Communication should live where the work is being done. So separating those platforms for the particular person is really, really, really valuable.
That's a good point. One in particular, because I think it gets hard for someone to kind of picture this, especially if they're an early business owner. But eventually you get to a point where your business is side where you have leadership teams that run leadership teams. And that's kind of where that comes into play a little bit, or a lot of bit, where you have the, what'd you call it? The top level view.
I would say, like, I look at things in sports, right? So for me, it's like Goodyear Blimp, right? Is looking down.
Okay, that's
coach's
yep.
box, right? I can see the whole field,
Yeah.
but I'm not close enough to understand what's going on. Plus, my communication is with the other coach. My communication is going to be with a leader or a player, but it's not going to be in real time. And then you're going to have coach's sideline view, and then you're going to have in the trenches players view. I played linebacker, so to me, I see the field a certain way.
Mhm.
So I want to be able to see it like this from an end zone view, and that's a completely different perspective. So I just take it from that. So let's just call it either it's the Goodyear Blimp,
Yeah.
or it's the coach's box.
Love it. That's awesome.
So, and I think as you get into scaling your business, what happens normally is as you scale your business, and you could take a gym, for example, since I've ran a few of them, as you scale your business, so does your stress.
Mhm.
So you start scaling it up and up and up and up and up, and then your stress gets worse with it because you're doing too much. And then in the entrepreneur journey, what often happens is expert owners, people that have high level of competency about a skill. So it's not a product. Their product is a service. They feel like they lose actually the connection to the work. So they create chaos, self-sabotage the work so that they have to jump back in there and do it because nobody could do it better than them.
It's all subconscious.
And all they're doing is, I don't like the fact that I'm getting more removed from the work that I'm considered the expert in. So therefore, I will create the problem and chaos, and then they will jump back in and have to fix it so they feel important. And in the same side of things, if delivery is not dialed in your business, then you will self-sabotage sales because you'll feel as if I sell more, I can't deliver. So I don't want to give myself more work. But yet I'm complaining because I don't have enough money. But if I actually gain the cash flow to help me move forward and extend my runway a little bit, then what ends up happening is I've just given myself more stress because they associate work with stress. So you have to have systems to scale. And certain platforms don't scale. So Trello is never going to scale to a certain point. And we've seen there's certain platforms you want to actually work at the top level and work down. In the world of business, just like in the world of sports, we call it collapsing time. Having a mentor, having a leader, having a captain, having somebody that you could model after, work backwards and be like, that's a better process.
Mm-hmm.
You're a high jumper. If I said, hey, I'm going to bring a guy over here from Qatar, he's going to sit right next to you and give you some tips. Would you pay attention?
Talking about Mutaz?
Just saying, he may know a thing or two, right?
Yeah.
He's going to wear his glasses. He's going to sit right there. His legs are going to look like this. Yeah. But he's going to probably tell you one thing. And that one thing may be the difference between you going 7.1 and 7.2. It may be the difference between going 7.2 and a half and 7.3. And you sit someone else down there and they're going to tell you a lot of things. But what is it? Is it more information or is it useful? So it needs context. Mm-hmm. But I think that what you're trying to do is collapse time. So the faster you can get the right information for where you are, the better it is. I also think that's one of the things that you guys do so well in like your automation, in your CRM setups, is that you create visibility for people.
Yeah.
So I'd love to actually parlay this conversation into that, because when you set up a CRM, you're not just setting it up for the owner, you're setting it up for the active user. So you're creating a solution for the end user, like the person that the employee that's in the business that's doing that work.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really important that most people don't think about.
If you are an executive leader that is looking to get in the best shape of your life from a health standpoint and want the same coaches in your corner that are working with professional athletes, then reach out. Athlete HQ.
What about the way you set up CRM systems and the fact that you've been behind the curtain at a lot of businesses makes you different than everybody else?
I think the biggest thing is going to be the variety of niches that we work with. A lot of people, most people that are in our industry or do what we do,
Niche down.
they niche down, which is the advice that we got early on. And I say this to our team every single day, kind of a side topic, but everybody tells me niche down, charge more. And in my mind, there's something that tells me I'm going to figure out a way to make it work and I'm going to make it profitable. And we're in the process of really making that work right now. That's one thing that sets us aside. We work with construction businesses that manage inventory. We work with solopreneurs. We work with gyms, brick and mortar businesses, companies that are doing 50 million a year, HVAC companies. So we've seen a lot, and we've had to go through a lot of. Sometimes we've messed up early on, right? But we learn.
We all do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you learn from those experiences. But we work with such a variety of niches with different levels of leadership in the business. We kind of know what to create for anybody now. And we have an SOP for a lot of different things. So we have the solopreneur that is just, has a small ad budget generating maybe 100 leads a month. We know exactly what to set up for them. Then we have people who have 20 sales people on a sales team. Then we know that we have to add layers onto that. They need to visually be able to see all of the conversations. They need a round robin distribution to all of the salespeople, and they need to have a training so they know how to filter the system so they can only see the leads that are assigned to them, so they don't get all mixed up and everything's all over the place. So we just know how to look at every scenario at most business sizes and execute on that. And we have a plan for it from the get-go. So I think that's what sets us apart, and it's hard to do.
Sure. I mean, when you work with people, if you're able to solve their problem and they want it done fast, they're going to pay a lot of money. If they want their problem solved, but they don't care how long it takes, then they'll drag it out. And you drag out the work, they'll drag out the payment. And in the consulting space you're able to drag it out because the payments are higher and they just drag it out. They don't do anything. That's why you're a consultant, is you're just sitting there like, oh, you should do this, but nothing ever gets implemented. You guys are implementers. When you start looking at the diversity of niches, there are best practices though. What are the most common things that you see people doing wrong?
I think at which stage of business?
In the CRM specifically.
In the CRM specifically? Lead priority is the biggest one.
And explain that.
Lead priority is basically, I'll explain the scenario of someone doing something wrong. A lot of companies have a CRM because they know they need one. Some people don't know the real reason why they have one. They just know they need one. They were told that they need one. They need a place to store their contacts, data, etc. A lot of people don't know how to leverage it, and they treat every lead the same when they come into the pipeline. They don't have a way to distinguish of which leads do they need to be spending more time on. Anyone who's actually generated a lead knows that not all leads are created equal. Some leads are low quality and they're never going to answer you back. Some leads are higher quality and they're more responsive and they actually pick up the phone and they schedule, but maybe they no-show. So there's stages of priority. Should we spend more time on someone that had a conversation on the phone and actually scheduled an appointment on getting that person to show up to the appointment? Is that where my time is better invested? Should I spend more time on a lead who has actually responded back and forth to me via text message, but maybe didn't pick up my phone call? Should I try to call them again tomorrow as opposed to calling someone who hasn't responded in 14 days at all? Like, what are the odds that lead's just going to wake up, revive, and go, you know what, maybe I should answer their phone call today. There's a way to segment those and create pipelines or pipeline stages where you can create groups of your leads, or we call them opportunities, so that they automatically move and there's automations in the background. So when certain things happen, it triggers them to move to a different stage. That way salespeople or receptionists, whatever it might be, business owners, can go to the opportunity section and they can see all of their priority leads. We can segment them we can segment the people who have responded the most, who have actually had conversations with people in the past and maybe didn't get a chance to schedule, so that you can spend the majority of your time on those leads, get the most bang for your buck and convert more, rather than adding a CSV file to a power dialer and calling 100 contacts that you don't know who's going to pick up.
Yeah. It's, I mean, you're prioritizing engagement, which is really important. Now, when you do that, do you have to flex when you say it? It's a little, I'm just curious, did you do that? Is that important?
No, sometimes when you're fit and you exercise consistently, you get real passionate and your muscles kind of,
They pop out like that. I'm just asking. I was just wondering. I didn't know if you had to do that.
do a high rocks with me. It might happen to you too.
No, I'm going to keep my jacket on. I look good. Look good. All right. So this is, I think it's really cool because when you look at your journey and you look at this idea of like, you learned what the feeling was to win. And I think that a lot of people compete, not a lot of people win. The winner circle is very small. For 20 plus years, I like to win. And I think that the lessons that I've learned from winning have far surpassed my lessons that I've learned from losing. Because when there's skin in the game and my hands on the line and I'm ready to go, I know that I've done my best. So sometimes I've won by just the pure nature. I put my best foot forward and the outcome wasn't what I wanted, but because I did my best, because oftentimes I've won games in environments and in situations, even though I know I wasn't perfect. But in the world of losing, you could always look at the imperfections and think about that's why. That's why. But in the world of winning, you could look at the imperfections and then you could say, okay, I got something to study here. I got some opportunities here. So you look at them different. And one of the things that I've learned is a good coach and a good coaching culture is harder on you after a win than they are on a loss. The individual should be harder on themselves after a loss, and the team and the culture should be harder on themselves after a win. And you look at championship programs, and that's normally pretty consistent. And often the reason why that happens is because the coach's immaturity to see that is because they haven't had perspective of actually winning. They've never experienced it at that level. So all they know is what was done to them, and they bring in that losing culture with them to another environment. So they technically are punishing you, push-ups, runs, conditioning, harder on you, more attention to detail because you lost. So what happens to the athlete mind? Whereas if you win and the coach is harder on you, he's looking at and saying missed opportunities. There's an opportunity for growth. That is a very, very different psychological framework to work off of. And what happens is it makes it very, very healthy for hard practice that most people don't think about. So I think that's fascinating personally. And I think that's kind of the way I look at it. I also think what's really unique about you is this idea of you learned how to win in this one specific venture, whether it be in business, but it started with high jump. And then it moved in your athletic career to become a decathlete, to do 10 things, right? The ultimate athlete is the ability to be, good at everything, not great at one thing. But in reality, you actually are great. People do not separate. Like one of my biggest frustrations in the guru world is that average is the enemy. Like average is not the enemy. The enemy is the person who thinks that they're great, but they're not elite. That's the enemy. The real enemy is the one who thinks they identify with greatness, but they're so far away from being elite that they don't even know. Average people, they're not interested in the same thing you're interested in. They're not going to put the hours that you and Angela put in. They're not going to do that. I've seen your work ethic. It's on display. And at the elite level, Pat Riley said it best. Hard work never guaranteed anything. But without it, they don't have a chance. So, and I would take advice from somebody who's been a part of 23, 24% of every NBA championship in history, whether it be player or coach. That's an insane statistic. So hard work it's going to happen. You're going to put it in, it's required. But if you hang your hat on hard work, then you could just do a lot of the wrong work and it's still hard work. But when you do things differently, which is, it seems like you're doing in active solutions, when you do things differently and you put the hard work in place, you're collapsing time and you're doing a lot of better work the right way. And that's where I think the real power is. So you go from this interest of, learning how to win as an individual sport in a single event as a high jumper to learning so many different disciplines as a decathlete. You're doing the same thing, starting from a single niche, mastering that, and then you're going into being very widespread as not being niche specific and having 10 different industries that you're serving. And you're in your decathlete for sports right now in your business.
I've never even put those two together before in my life.
We have patterns, and normally our loops, like we have patterns, and a loop needs to keep looping. It has to. It's like a slinky on the stairs. It's got to go, and it has to let the other part, the back end of the slinky, come all the way down before it moves forward. And oftentimes people stop it before the back. Like if you shut off inertia when it's coming down, it won't keep going over. But one of your patterns is the fact that you start niche down, you're battle testing it, and then you start to expand, and then you create micro problems, fix those, and then it starts to open up this wide net of people that you could support. So actuality, your niche is not actually the industry. Your niche is the solution. Your business niche is not the people you end up working with. It's the fact that you're able to productize this service of CRM, project management solutions, speed to lead as their individual problem, but getting to the root of the source. And I think that's what you guys do so well, but it's just your loop, and it's going to inevitably expand into other, avenues inside of your business that will be probably very exciting in the future too. Yeah. Because there's breakpoints, right? So in business, you have revenue breakpoints, like 0 to 6 figures. I got to get to 6-figure trainer, right? I mean, you should do that. You should be able to do that quite easily. And then it's like $250,000. Then it's like, everyone's like, I did 1.2 million. I remember that. Like, that's like the famous number that everyone does. And I've been there too, because I was like, yeah, I was so excited when I hit it. I did like 1.7, 1.27. It was like the greatest thing ever. Like, I hit this number. And then what happened? Well, I had a whole bunch of problems. And then it just, and you find yourself in the sand trap. So there's these breakpoints in business. And what you're doing is you're creating a solution at a specific breakpoint. And the breakpoint for most people that you run into are businesses that have a speed to lead problem. And then the next breakpoint is probably a non-prioritizing all of the volume that you end up creating for them. And then the next breakpoint is probably oversight or accurate data. So you're creating these solutions, but I would say if you backed up, I bet you'd probably be able to correlate the breakpoints in their businesses with the solutions you're providing.
There's actually another interesting one of large businesses that need help from something they should have gotten help from a long time ago. And it's usually in the businesses that grew really quickly because of the industry that they chose. Sure. So for example, for us in the beginning, it was very easy to grow whenever we started making chatbots. And I will say, I think it was easier for us than it would have been in a different industry. It's because we were in a fast growing industry. We had a sexy thing that we were offering. So everybody—
it's a tidal wave. So you hold that wave. There's a lot of momentum.
Yeah. People showed up to calls and it was just easy to sign people up. Everybody wanted it, type of thing. When we encounter other businesses that are in the same position, we have businesses that are doing $1 to $3 million a year, and they have bottlenecks or problems that companies have when they're doing less than when they're solopreneurs or even like a team of 5 people type of thing. So they come to us with these problems, and the room for growth is significantly greater because they have these high lead volumes. They're spending so much money on ads, but they don't even know how to, they don't know when to call a lead. They don't even know how to operate their CRM. They're having like these
they're successful by default though. They're successful because of a lot of the other things, which I don't want to take that away from them. Yeah, those intangibles is one thing. What you're running into is like Goodrat's law, right? Where you're like the law of like the theory of restraints, right? There's only one bottleneck though. Yep. So they solved the problem at certain points, and maybe their bottleneck was leads. And then once they solved that, they never went back and solved the other problem.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is identifying the bottleneck. There's only one bottleneck at a time. And then a leader's job is to first and foremost identify the bottleneck and then focus all their energy on that bottleneck and solve that problem so that you could find the next restraint. And then where you get really good is that when you could start putting people on the next restraint that you know is going to happen as you address this one, so that you increase flow in the business, and then you actually hit that one down and it happens faster. So hiring people in sports, it's having a mentor. In coaching, it's having someone that could like help you with fast tracking stuff. It's all about collapsing time. So, you know, great books, The Race, The Goal, right? This is theories of constraints at the originator level. And a really good business model should be successful in a boom market, but it should always be able to scale in a bust market. So if the model doesn't work in a bust market, right, down market, then I think the model is broken. But most models need to be able to scale or swing from one side of the pendulum to the other. And this is why what happens is that's where trends fall off. Whereas if it doesn't get sticky and be something that's all about it, then it becomes a problem.
Solving those types of problems is where an entrepreneur becomes better and better, and I think they learn the most. So whenever you find these certain problems, and then you kind of discover that how important trial and error is. So you have your theory of constraints, you find whatever it is that your problem is, and you can't always find the solution right away. And I think you learn a lot from, because a lot of times people will try to find the solution and they'll just kind of like dabble around with it. But after you get a couple years into business, you start to realize how important it is. You find the trends and realize how important it is to get through the trial and error as fast as freaking possible. And that's one of the things that I think I do the most, and sometimes too much.
You do it really well because, and I won't say too much, because I think that we oftentimes, and in my case, in a lot of ways, I'll always jump back into coaching.
Yeah.
That's really easy for me. But when it comes to something that's difficult for me, I tend to, once we get it going and then we'll get it right, I'll let someone else handle it. And when you're not in the weeds to know enough about it, you could get it going and then they could go get it wrong.
Yeah.
And they get it wrong, but the result's better. So you feel like, oh, that's okay. And you're disconnected from the work a little bit. And I can't be in everything. And I also don't have certain skills that are best suited for me. But what you do really well is actually tunnel vision. You go head down, and you're like, like we talked about in the beginning, is figuring it out. So this is deep work.
If you want to bring your professional grade studio on the road to record high quality content, GoBox Studio.
Where do you go to do your deep work? And then first and foremost, how do you identify what should you be working on? And then what do you do to get in your state to do deep work?
I don't really have anything that I don't have a state that I get into. It just becomes all that I think about, I think.
But how do you identify what is it that you need to work on?
So,
because we're talking about finding a bottleneck. How do you find bottlenecks that you need to go work on because something's broken or it's not working?
you can
Where does that stand out? Because as a coach,
the first thing you're going to experience is the result, is the downside or whatever it is that's making you realize that there's a problem. That's the first step, is like, oh, I'm hurting, low revenue, whatever it is, fulfillment team complaining. And then you kind of narrow it down. And we usually have a process of, especially in the acquisition, we have something called the acquisition funnel that I actually presented at the summit. And it shows you exactly how to identify the bottlenecks or in the constraints within the business. So look at the result first, and then you can really identify what the actual problem is, at least in a broad spectrum, what the problem is. If you identify like what's happening on the back end, and then you look internally, usually you can pinpoint it. Now, solving that problem is where the trial and error comes in. Once I find out what the problem is, and I can give a perfect example, we ran into this issue where people were coming up to the calls and they either weren't qualified or they weren't interested in what we were selling. That's a problem. And that led to less sales. So the first thing that we noticed is, why are we not making any sales? And then we noticed that people are coming to the calls, and this is the result. And we tested everything. We tested sales trainers. We tested different ads. We tested different video ads, whatever it might be. The thing that we saw was, what if it's the offer that's burnt out? What if conversational AI specifically is becoming too commoditized because everybody's trying to jump in this? What if we try offering exactly what we do, which is CRM customization? Is we do CRM customization. That's our whole offer on the back end, but our lead magnet was conversational AI because it was sexy. Maybe it's just not sexy anymore.
Yeah.
Then we found the problem from first. We spent tens of thousands of dollars on other solutions trying to figure out, like, how can we get more people to show up qualified? The thing is that there's a disconnect. Well, that was commoditized, but now, since it's not as sexy and it's not as flashy because everybody's doing it, there's a disconnect between why people were showing up to the call and what they were going to receive on the back end on how we were pitching it. So if we can remove that disconnect, and on the front end, we start offering, hey, we'll customize your CRM and then add a sexy offer to it. Maybe we can do it in less than 14 days or your money back, which is actually our guarantee. The people were coming to the calls. They have larger businesses. They have the problems that we can solve, and the solutions that we were pitching them were perfect. That was the answer. And it took a lot of time to figure out, but it was the trial and error, like guys say.
You got to fall forward. You move a little bit.
Yeah.
Don't get stuck, because nothing good happens in stagnant water.
Yeah.
Find this problem. What do you do when you go into your deep work state? What does that look like for you? So instead of what's the phase, what does it look like for Ashton to, I'm working, headphones on, locked in? What does that look like for you?
It's me sitting in front of my desk for lots of hours, trying, looking for the next thing that we're going to do, trial and error on like advertisement, for example.
Is there anyone watching you? Is there anything going on?
Angela, sometimes when she comes into the room and turns the light off and then leaves just to bother me. But
listen, I wouldn't be complaining right now. I just being honest with you.
Yeah, no, she, nobody watches me. There's nobody really around. Angela's kind of doing her own thing most of the time. The only thing that keeps me sane is I reach a point where we hit 4:30 p.m. and I leave to go work out, and then oftentimes I come home and I work again. There's nothing special. There's no.
You find yourself working till 11 o'clock sometimes?
Absolutely, yeah. And I have this weird obsession, or it's like a compulsive disorder, where I'll lay down and then I get a great idea and I have to get up out of bed and go back to the desk. And Angela hates that as well, but there's no special state.
Why are you waking her up, man? Sleep in another room.
Yeah, I know. But there's no special state. I think it's just, I've had a good feedback loop and reward system for a long enough period of time. And there's like a certain level of obsession with what I do now, that it's just, I just kind of work and I try to figure out the problem. If I don't figure it out, then I come back the next day and I try it again. And eventually you crack a code and you have more fun things to work on. Like right now, we signed up too many people this month. We hit a record, and the fulfillment team is like, what are we going to do? And I'm like,
we're going to figure it out.
Yeah, I don't know. But
so those late nights, 11 o'clock, similar to those 100, run-ups and approaches by yourself on your own.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
And all of that adds up over time. You give somebody, there are people, I know a lot of people who are in business and they're not really in business. And they're just, their heart's not in it. And I can just tell. They're in business. Some people have been in business for 15 years and they're like, yeah, I don't know what the problem is, X, Y, and Z. It's been like this for the last 5 years. And I'm like, if you were really in it, it wouldn't be like that for the last 5 years. I know that for a fact.
What would you tell to someone that feels that way right now?
They either need to try to find something different, or they need to reignite the passion that they initially had for the business in some way, shape, or form. Because if you have that, the hours will put themselves in. You get to a certain point where it's like, I don't have a choice to work anymore. I do it because it's like, this is kind of the thing that I live for now. And when you put in those long hours, you can't do it by choice. It can't be. It is kind of a discipline thing at the same time, where it's like, okay, yeah, I'll schedule this amount of time to work, but sometimes you don't have a choice, and you might you might experience that as well, where there's just, when you're trying to grow your own business or you're trying to grow sites at scale, you might hit these points where like you encounter these problems that you just need to find the answer to. And it's not like you wake up in the morning, like I'm going to wake up at 7 and because I want my business to grow, I'm going to work, a 10-hour day. I'm going to work a little bit longer today.
I wish it was a 10-hour day.
Yeah.
Take that.
It comes down to there's a passion for what you do, to where it no longer becomes a choice to do the work, and that work compiles over time. A year of having that type of obsession and doing those extra 4 hours because you couldn't go to bed and you had a great idea and you want to go test it faster. That stuff adds up over time, especially over a period of 2 years. Like that's
I tried 22.
Yeah, exactly.
There's 2 things I want to say about the hours because I think it is important. So I say I wish it was a 10-hour day because it is significantly more than that consistently over time. It is, at least in the stage that we're in right now. The reason why I wish it was a 10-hour day or less, and this idea that we could get into the Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week, is because it will be proof that the systems and the culture is working. It would be proof that we don't have to put in the 10-hour days. The choice is then on you. So when your back's up against the wall, I don't think business owners make great decisions. I don't think people make great decisions when their back's up against the wall. I don't think athletes don't make great decisions when they're getting their butt kicked and their back's up against the ropes. So you make really good decisions in momentum because it's easier to turn like, skiing or on a jet ski when there's no brakes. When you're moving, it's easy to kind of slalom your way through certain situations. So I wish it was easier and I wish it was a lower amount of work because it would be the sign that we're actually doing some of these other things. But the stage that we're in right now and cracking, there's a point in which you crack that 8-figure mark that you really want to start to like think about it differently, and not being there yet is like, God, we gotta kind of get this one. I know that we're in the messy middle, right?
Mhm.
And it's harder that you have just enough money to where it's like you have a bigger bloat of the business, but you don't have the ability, the bandwidth to do the work, and then you are on such a short leash because every decision matters. Whereas when you have way more revenue, there's enough leash to where you can make a couple bad decisions and you could say, don't worry about it, shut that down right away. You don't have to kind of beat it like a dead horse. You could shut it down quick and then move on. So as you get to different stages and you like clear up those bottlenecks, then there's bigger problems. But what I find, which is why we brought you in when we did, is because to kind of go back to the beginning and reset this thing up, it was just like, all right, let's just go find the best person that we know. Let's go find the person that, high level says is the best. Let's go find the person that I saw, on Joe Kaplan and is like, they're doing it already. They're smart. They're going to grow with us, but they're better than where we are today right now. Find that person, collapse time, like a mentor would do a coach, like a coach would for an athlete, like a captain would for someone else that wants to kind of get into the JV to the varsity environment. Collapse time, let them implement the work, learn from them so that we could then scale our business, but would not scale the stress. And that's what we do. So we find solutions and then we actively pursue them and implement them in the business so that our actions are aligned with our ambitions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how we put things together. It's the same thing we would within sports.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's been fun. We could keep going all day long. But Ashley's got to get to dinner.
Yeah.
All right. What's next for Active Solutions? What's next for Ashton? What's next for your team as it grows?
I think it's for Active Solutions right now. We're in that. We have a lot of momentum right now. A lot of momentum.
Great.
There's a lot of problems that are coming from it on the back end. But one of the things that you said is good decisions come from momentum. And we're trying to abuse that right now. A lot of people get momentum. They have their best months and then they get comfortable and they stop. They feel like that's the time to stop. We're trying to abuse the momentum right now. We're trying to just keep growing. And I think if we just keep doing what we're doing, that'll get us to kind of like the next stage. In terms of for me specifically, I think that I mean, I love what I do. I don't want to do anything else. So I think it's just putting the energy into the business. Me and Angela talk about all the time. Like if we didn't make any money from running the business, which at one point we did not, we would still wake up and be just as pumped every day to kind of like wake up, run the team meetings in the morning, and then kind of do what we do.
What do you
So,
like about it so much?
man, I just the purpose, we have a reason to wake up in the morning. A lot of people don't have that. I think
And the
so.
fact that you guys are doing it together is very inspiring. I love watching you guys work. I think you show up in a great position in a great place. And I think it is clear the value that you're bringing to other businesses when you do that and to the people because you're impacting their lives. Like I'm a big believer, for my entire coaching career, and it will continue to be this way, which is I believe that I will teach life lessons through sports. And my job is to empower athletes to do great things. Like that's my goal. And in business, we believe that small business are the lifeblood of their communities. That if you actually support the entrepreneur, that the communities, because that was Pede Plumbing used to be the back of, a little league kid's shirt in a small little Optimus league that he sponsored for, a lot of money for that company. And seeing that and that support to that little kid's dream so that he could do it, then eventually when you needed someone to come into your house, they were there and they were dependable and reliable. They are the lifeblood of a community. And if you could support them so that they could do what they do best, then I think there's a lot of value that you can offer to the world in different communities. So the purpose is a big deal.
I think a lot of times it's good to be able to convince a small business owner that they are the lifeblood of their community, because I think that gets forgotten way too much. And I think the pure drive to kind of like want to do better goes away for some people after a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, like at Sites at Scale, we firmly believe that small businesses are the lifeblood of a community. And if we serve them by being their digital partner, we could then serve our staff to become a career destination. So this is encompasses our mission, but it's a story that a lot of people could get behind because we get to be a part of a chiropractor, a gym, a learning disability center, a products center, a cleansing brand, all of these different unique businesses that you are part of in Active Solutions, and we get to be a part of it in Sites at Scale on the marketing side. And we want you to not be in a place where you're competing, because that's the thing is a lot of people, we talked about it before, a lot of people compete, but not a lot of people win. And if you think about it is you got to get away from the competition and then start to win. And the way that you do that is you're already top of mind. So you build your brand. Then you actually have to have a high level of attention. And then you have attraction. You're a sexy guy, you get eyes on you, but you can't get a date to the dance. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. But you get a lot of eyeballs on you, but if you can't get a date to the dance, then you're not that sexy. You got to make sure that your business is attractive. And then it's accessibility. That's what you guys do. Set up the CRMs, make things very clear, speed to lead, and then value. And then the last thing is you got to have some sort of a dashboard, a scoreboard that tells you you're winning or losing, and you got to know your numbers. So these are the things that we focus on so that we could support that entrepreneur journey. Because if we do that, then we all win. So as chiropractors fix everybody's backs, we like to say that we have entrepreneurs' backs. And the only way that we could do that is by being their digital partner so that they could actually do what they do best. So thank you for helping us get to that point. Thank you for helping the many businesses that you support. I love watching your journey, and I'm super fun to go out, eat, and have a good time, because that's what business does. It connects some really good people.
Absolutely. Yeah, we appreciate you as well. I think over these last couple of years, we've kind of like looked at you as somewhat of a mentor. You've done a lot for us, so we appreciate you. You've helped us get to where we are as well.
It's just the beginning, man. Should be fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah.